Hey everyone, I thought I'd show my face in this video just so you can see again who I am. I know I introduced myself with some pictures before, but in this video I thought I'd show you and keep my video on for a little bit so that you can see that I'm not just, it's not just a disembodied voice over the slides. So in this presentation, I'm just briefly going to talk through learning and learning theory and what that kind of means for this course. So what I want you to do first, this course is about how people learn three big words: learning, teaching, and knowledge. Now, I'd like you to pause the video and take a moment and see if you can come up with definitions for each of these three words. And you can add them as annotations and perusal, or just think about them to yourself if you want, but using the annotation feature might be a really good place to do this. So sometimes definitions can be a little bit hard and even maybe pedantic. So maybe instead of definitions, or if you're not thinking about definitions, maybe you could also come up with a bunch of examples of learning, teaching, and knowledge and add those to each of those pieces. What are these things? So again, go ahead and pause, take a moment to do that, and add some annotations on this particular slide about learning, teaching, and knowledge. Okay, so teaching is an action word. It's something that you do or something that someone does. Lots of actions are associated with teaching, such as talking, presenting, responding, facilitating, and critiquing. Then there's lots of other words that remind us of teaching, like coaching or practicing or mentoring. But in this educational psychology course, we're always going to be thinking about teaching this way. We will think about teaching as the act of making learning happen, or the act of making learning more likely to happen. Therefore, for our purposes, there's no such thing as teaching if there's not learning taking place. So in this class, we will always take learning as the starting point. So we're not that focused on teaching, we're actually more focused on student learning. And we think about teaching as an act by which a facilitator helps that learning actually unfold. So teaching in the background, learning in the foreground. So what is learning? For our purposes, we'll think about learning as the act of increasing knowledge. Now, notice that I didn't say getting more knowledge, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but rather increasing knowledge. For our purposes, it's not that useful to talk about learning if we don't talk about what it is that's being learned, the relevant knowledge. So let's go ahead and talk about knowledge. What are some of the things that are known? You can definitely know a fact, like I know that Albany is the capital of New York. You can know how to do something, some procedure, such as how to change a flat tire. You can know emotions or affects, things about yourself, like I know that I love my family. There's also cultural or within group kind of knowledge. So some people might know a word like allegro, or a word like boomer, or whatever new lingo or slang terms are being used today. You will probably know more about that than I will. You have some cultural knowledge that I don't. There's also this idea that students who are, there's also institutional kinds of knowledges. Like if you think about clubs that you might be involved in or were involved in, like maybe an improv team, there's this idea that students who are further ahead in the club maybe know some things that you just don't. They have this kind of built-in institutional knowledge about how things are done. And then this part is really important. There is a lot of collective knowledge, a lot of stuff that's not really about what you as an individual know, but about how you work as part of a unit or a team to know something. So for example, we together on a sports team, we know how to play ultimate frisbee in a way that helps us win. That's something that we all have to kind of know together in different ways. So we know how to participate in this collective kind of action. So there's lots and lots of different kinds of knowledges. We can think about knowledge as something people do, like this person knows how to paint a picture of this flower. So here's the type of knowledge, how to paint a picture of a flower. We can think about knowledge as something that people have, like a fact that I have in my head the rules of basketball. But we should also be able to think about knowledge as something people participate in. Like you participate in a conversation in a foreign language. You participate in the singing of a song in a choir. So in this course, I really want us to think kind of our default way about knowledge is something that you have. Like I know something means I have it in my head, but I also really want us to be able to think about knowledge in more complex ways. Specifically by thinking about knowledge as something that people participate in, because that's going to unblock for us some really productive ways to think about various content areas like sports, physical education, ensembles like in music, art, conversations, cultural immersion, work, all these different places where learning can take place. And so that's why I didn't want to say learning is getting knowledge, because knowledge is not always something that you get and take away with you in your head. Knowledge can be something that you participate in. Knowledge can be something that you do. So learning, again, in this course, we're thinking about learning is increasing knowledge. Teaching is the act of increasing in learning or increasing the learning. And so we're left with kind of what it is that we want students to know, right? That's going to be the core question. All right, so let's talk a little bit about teaching. When you're trying to teach, meaning you're trying to make learning more likely to happen, meaning you're trying to help a child or student increase their knowledge, get better at participating in knowledge, get better at having knowledge, etc. We need to think about lots of different dimensions. Kind of our core three in this class are behavioral dimensions. What's the child's behavior? How is the child acting? Cognitive dimensions. What's the child thinking? How is the child thinking about this idea? And sociocultural dimensions. What larger group of people is the child participating in? How is the child socializing with cultural others or becoming part of a culture or collective way of doing things? I also really want us to think about some other dimensions like political dimensions. What equity concerns are shaping this child's experience? Things like race, racism, poverty, heterosexism affect the way that child or that children learn. Self-perceptual dimensions. How is the child thinking about their own experience? Do they feel confident? Do they feel that they're ready to learn or not so much? And developmental dimensions. Where is the child in their life course? How is that shaping their exploration of the world? Is a teenager going through adolescence? Is the child 5 just learning how to read, for example? These kinds of things are things that we need to be paying attention to if we want to teach successfully or understand successful teaching. So we're thinking across all these various ways of thinking about children learning. Okay, so in this class, we're going to focus on learning theories. We've already talked a little bit about that, but there's a lot of different ways to think about what knowledge is, and different learning theories are going to think about knowledge differently. So if a learning theory has a different way of thinking about what knowledge is, then that's going to change how we think about how learning happens most effectively. Does learning happen most effectively when you memorize the most facts? Does learning happen the most effectively when you're rewarded for good behavior? Does it happen most effectively when you're mentored in a hands-on way, one-on-one? So each of those lead to different ways of teaching, different things that teachers do to support students in that learning. And those ways of teaching are based on those different dimensions and include thinking about, what is the content the student is trying to learn and where is the child coming from. So in this class, we're really going to cover basically 2 main theories of learning, but really sort of like 3, 4, maybe 4.5. But the big ones are going to be cognitive theory or cognitive approaches to learning, which we'll dive into more in Module 2, and sociocultural approaches to learning, which is in Module 3. And you'll read a little bit about both of those, plus a little bit more in your next reading, the Wortham reading. Then in Module 4, we'll talk about issues of equity and we'll talk about issues of development. And then towards the end of the course, we'll talk about some other areas of our lives where learning occurs. I'm currently thinking about like learning at work or learning on the move or with our bodies or learning in places. I'm still not 100% sure which direction we'll go, and it may depend on some of our course activities as we go. So 2 quick last things. In this class, we're going to draw on a lot of different fields of study and scholarship that brought us this material. So we're going to talk about psychology and educational psychology and anthropology and the humanities and design and curriculum instruction and neuroscience and human-computer interaction. But our home field in this class is the learning sciences. I'm a learning scientist, and my goal in this class is to help you think like learning scientists. So just so you have a name for what it is that we're doing here, we're doing the learning sciences. And finally, I'll just throw this out there. There are no learning styles. You maybe heard that you're a visual learner, or some people are auditory learners, or some people are hands-on kinesthetic learners. It's just not true. There is a TED Talk that you'll watch soon after this video that kind of walks you through it, but I'm sorry. I promise we'll get you a better learning theory by the time this course is over. So, all right, go read the Wortham piece, kind of get a feel for it, go find out why learning styles are false, and I'll see you in the next presentation and in the annotations.